few weeks ago, we made an incredible discovery together. Ancient astronomers in China recorded an impossible celestial event, total darkness and a halo around the sun, at the exact year and hour when Jesus was dying on the cross in Jerusalem. But that video opened a door to an even greater mystery. If China, on the other side of the world, saw the sky go dark, is it possible that Rome, which ruled Judea, saw nothing? Is it possible that the Greeks, masters of astronomy, didn't notice the sun switching off at noon? The answer will give you chills. They didn't just see it, they wrote it down. Today, we won't open only the Bible. Today, we will open the forbidden archives of ancient history. We will show you documents written by pagan historians, letters sent to Roman governors, and even Jewish sacred texts that confirm in black and white what the Gospels have been saying for 2,000 years. There is historical evidence that at the very moment Christ breathed his last, the whole earth trembled and the sun refused to shine. And the most shocking part? Modern science tells us that what happened that day technically could not have happened. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is not only a confirmation of your faith, it is proof that history belongs to God. To understand the weight of this miracle, we must first remove one idea from our minds, that it was a natural phenomenon. For centuries, skeptics have said, "Oh, the disciples were simple fishermen, they got confused. It was just a solar eclipse." But there is a massive scientific problem with that theory, one that every astronomer knows. Jesus was crucified during the Jewish Passover, Pesach, and Passover always falls by biblical and astronomical law during the full moon. Now, follow me carefully, because this is the crucial point. A solar eclipse happens when the moon moves between the earth and the sun, blocking it. But that can happen only during a new moon. During a full moon, the moon is on the opposite side of the earth from the sun. It is physically, geometrically impossible to have a natural solar eclipse during Passover. And yet, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell us that from noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. 3 hours. A total eclipse lasts at most about 7 minutes. Here, we're talking about 3 hours of deep darkness. If it wasn't an eclipse, what was it? Roman and Greek historians of the time couldn't explain it, but they were forced to record it. And their words have reached us. Let me introduce the first witness. He is not an apostle. He is not a Christian. His name is Thallus. Thallus was a historian who wrote a history of the Eastern Mediterranean around the year AD 52. Think about it. He was writing only about 20 years after the death of Jesus. Many eyewitnesses were still alive. Thallus did not believe in Jesus. In fact, in his writings, he tries to find a rational explanation for what happened. In his third book, Thallus describes the darkness that covered the land during the Crucifixion and tries to explain it as a solar eclipse. Do you understand the importance of this document? Thallus is trying to debunk the miracle, but in doing so, he admits the historical fact. If the darkness had never happened, Thallus would have said, "Christians are crazy, the sun shone all day long." But he doesn't. He says, yes, there was darkness, but it was only an eclipse. Without meaning to, this pagan historian confirms that the darkness at the crucifixion was a real historical event. But he's not the only one. There is another chronicler, a Greek named Phlegon of Tralles, who lived in the 2nd century. Phlegon was obsessed with dates and facts. In his work called Olympiads, he writes these exact words. In the 4th year of the 202nd Olympiad, there was an eclipse of the sun greater than any previously known. At the 6th hour of the day, that is noon, it became night, so that the stars appeared in the sky. And a great earthquake in Bithynia overturned many houses in Nicaea. Let's do the math. The 4th year of the 202nd Olympiad in the Greek calendar corresponds precisely to AD 33 in our calendar. Phlegon confirms the year AD 33. He confirms the hour, the 6th hour, noon, exactly as the Gospel says. He confirms the event, stars visible in the daytime, And he confirms another detail from the Gospels, the earthquake. Matthew 27:51 says, "The earth shook and the rocks split." Phlegon confirms that the quake was so violent it was felt all the way in Bithynia, in what is now Turkey. The earth cried out, and history took notes. But there is an even bolder piece of evidence. We have to jump forward to A.D. 197. In Carthage lived a brilliant man, a Roman lawyer converted to Christianity, Tertullian. Christians were being persecuted, killed, accused of inventing fairy tales. Tertullian decides to write a legal defense, the Apologeticum, addressed directly to the governors of the Roman Empire. Listen to what he dares to write to the Roman magistrates, speaking about the darkness at the death of Jesus. At the same moment, the light of day was withdrawn, though the sun was at its height. You yourselves have an account of this worldwide portent preserved in your archives. Stop and think for a moment. Tertullian is writing to authorities who want him dead. He is telling them, go check your state archives. If those documents did not exist, if that official record of darkness at noon had not been in the imperial archives, Tertullian would have been mocked and condemned immediately for lying. No lawyer cites evidence that doesn't exist before a hostile judge. Tertullian knew that the report of Pontius Pilate or imperial astronomical observations were there, archived in Rome. A state record the empire could not erase. Up to this point, we've seen pagan evidence. But the most stunning evidence, the kind that will touch your heart, comes from Jerusalem itself, from the religious leaders who condemned Jesus. In the Babylonian Talmud, one of the most sacred texts in Judaism, there is a mysterious passage. It's found in Tractat Yoma 39b. The rabbis recall that, mysteriously, miracles in the temple ceased at a precise moment in history. The text says, during the last 40 years before the destruction of the temple was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. If we go back exactly 40 years, we arrive at AD 30, the beginning of the period of the Crucifixion. What happened from that year onward? The Talmud lists 4 terrifying signs. The heavy gates of the temple, which required 20 men to close, opened by themselves every night, as if the Spirit of God were leaving the building. The central lamp of the menorah, the golden lampstand, kept going out, even though it was full of oil. But the most impressive sign concerns the scarlet thread. On Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the high priest tied a red wool thread to the temple. According to tradition, if God accepted the sacrifice for the sins of the people, that red thread would miraculously turn white as snow. It was the sign of divine forgiveness. The Talmud admits with sadness. For 40 years before the destruction of the temple, the scarlet thread never turned white again. It always remained red. Why? What changed in AD 30 to 33? Why did God stop responding to animal sacrifices in the temple? We know the answer. Because the true Lamb of God, the final sacrifice, had been offered on Golgotha. When Jesus cried, "It is finished," the veil of the temple was torn. The old system was over. Even the rabbis' documents, without meaning to, cry out that in that precise year, God's forgiveness moved from the temple to the cross. I want to bring you one last testimony, one that unites science and revelation. Tradition tells us about Dionysius the Areopagite. Years before meeting the Apostle Paul in Athens, Dionysius was a young astronomy student in Egypt in the city of Heliopolis. That famous Passover Friday, he saw the sun darken against every law of nature. Dionysius knew it wasn't an eclipse. He knew the celestial orbits could not be doing what they were doing. Terrified, he is said to have exclaimed, "Either the divine is suffering, or he suffers compassion for the one who suffers, or the mechanism of the universe is dissolving." Through science, Dionysius understood what many had not understood through the scriptures. The Creator was dying. Nature itself had put on mourning. When years later Paul arrived in Athens and explained that God had died and risen for love, Dionysius was the first to believe, because he had already seen the sign in the sky. He had seen the pain of God written in the stars. Why have I told you all this? Why does it matter? We live in a world that tells us the Bible is just a book of myths, that Jesus was only a good teacher. But history tells a different story. The stones, the Roman documents, the Greek chronicles, and the Jewish texts all cry out the same truth. On that Good Friday, an ordinary man did not die. It was a cosmic event, an event that stopped the sun, an event that shook the foundations of the earth. God entered history, and history bears the scars. These proofs are not only meant to convince our minds, but to reassure our hearts. If God had the power to darken the sun for the death of his Son, he also has the power to light up the darkness in your life today. No matter how dark your situation is, remember, after those 3 hours of darkness, the light returned. And 3 days later, the tomb was empty. Jesus is the Lord of history, and nothing, not even time, can erase his truth. I want to ask you to do something simple right now. Leave a sign of your faith below. Let's all write this sentence together in the comments, like a collective prayer. Jesus, you are the light of the world. Let's fill the comments with light. Share this video with someone who needs to know that our faith is built on the rock of truth. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of faith. May God bless us all.